On a bitterly cold night in February 2024, a tragedy quietly unfolded in the small town of Canton, Massachusetts. 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore was found lifeless in her apartment, the final chapter of a story no one could have anticipated. What at first appeared to be a heartbreaking suicide would soon reveal a far more disturbing truth, uncovering a tangled web of manipulation, corruption, and betrayal involving not just one individual, but an entire institution meant to protect the public. Sandra Birchmore's death wasn't just a senseless loss of life, it was the devastating consequence of a long-standing abuse of power by the very people who were supposed to safeguard her well-being. The relationship Sandra had with Matthew Farwell, a former Canton police officer, was more than just an inappropriate affair. It was the result of years of predatory behavior, fostered within a culture of silence and impunity that permeated the police department where Farwell once served. Today, we're going to dive deep into the life of Sandra Birchmore, the harrowing final months of her life, and the chilling conspiracy that shielded her abuser for far too long. This case sheds light on not only the systemic issues within law enforcement, but also the human cost of unchecked power. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories like this one. Let's begin. Canton, Massachusetts. The town appears peaceful, covered in a fresh layer of snow. Sandra Birchmore's life was characterized by quiet dreams and a longing for connection. Growing up in Massachusetts, she was a soft-spoken and kind-hearted young woman who harbored aspirations of working in law enforcement. Shy and introverted, Sandra often found it difficult to make friends, feeling isolated from those around her. Despite her struggles, she found solace in her passion for law enforcement, believing that a career in this field would provide her with purpose and direction. In 2014, Sandra joined the Canton Police Department's Youth Explorer program, designed to give young people first-hand experience in law enforcement. At just 15 years old, she met Officer Matthew Farwell, who was 9 years her senior and served as a mentor in the program. What should have been a formative opportunity for Sandra would instead mark the beginning of her tragic story. Farwell quickly recognized Sandra's vulnerability and eagerness for guidance. Over time, he began grooming her, manipulating her emotions and gaining her trust. What started as a seemingly innocent mentorship gradually escalated into a romantic relationship, one that Farwell worked hard to keep hidden. He exploited her impressionability, using his authority and charm to draw her deeper into his world. As their relationship developed, Sandra became increasingly isolated from her peers and family, further entrenching her in a dangerous dynamic. Farwell's influence over her grew stronger, blurring the lines between mentorship and manipulation. Sandra's dreams began to fade, overshadowed by the controlling grip of someone she once saw as a protector. This precarious situation foreshadowed the tragic events that would unfold, ultimately leading to her untimely death and the dark revelations that would shake the community to its core. Sandra's early interactions with Farwell. For Sandra, Matthew Farwell was not just a mentor, he was someone she admired deeply. Despite the significant age gap and the glaring power imbalance, she began to see him as a protector, an individual who could provide the security and emotional connection she desperately craved. To her, he embodied the guidance and support she had always longed for, transforming her admiration into an intense attachment. However, Farwell recognized this admiration as an opportunity to exploit. He skillfully manipulated his position of authority, using it to control Sandra emotionally. Gradually, he began to isolate her from friends and family, establishing a dangerous dominance over her life. What should have been a supportive relationship took a sinister turn as he exerted more influence, convincing her that their bond needed to remain a secret. The signs of Farwell's manipulation were apparent but easily overlooked by someone like Sandra, who was blinded by her feelings. He employed subtle tactics, preying on her insecurities and fears. As time passed, Sandra found herself ensnared in a web of secrecy and dependency. The emotional turmoil left her feeling trapped and scared, terrified of the potential repercussions if she ever revealed the truth about their relationship. Farwell deepened Sandra's isolation, feeding her empty promises and vague hints of a future together, while never truly committing to anything substantial. These fleeting assurances created a false sense of hope, keeping Sandra emotionally tethered to him despite the growing realization of her precarious situation. Each passing day intensified her internal struggle, torn between her dreams of a fulfilling life in law enforcement and the increasingly controlling grip Farwell held over her. As the relationship progressed, Sandra's aspirations began to dim under the weight of Farwell's manipulations. Her passion for law enforcement, once a beacon of hope, became overshadowed by feelings of worthlessness and confusion. She longed for a normal life, one where she could flourish both personally and professionally, yet felt suffocated by the reality of her circumstances. Farwell's presence became both a comfort and a cage, illustrating the profound impact of emotional abuse. Ultimately, this tumultuous relationship would lead Sandra down a dark path, forever altering the course of her life. The insidious nature of Farwell's control served as a harrowing reminder of how easily admiration can be twisted into something sinister, leaving behind a trail of devastation and lost potential. Text messages between Sandra and Farwell. By the time Sandra reached her early 20s, her relationship with Matthew Farwell had devolved into a toxic cycle of manipulation and emotional abuse. Farwell's behavior became increasingly erratic, oscillating between affectionate gestures and explosive outbursts of anger. One moment, he would express love and care, but the next, he would belittle her, leaving Sandra feeling worthless and trapped in a whirlwind of confusion. Although she confided in close friends about the relationship, she struggled to articulate the full extent of the manipulation, fearing judgment and grappling with her low self-esteem. This made it difficult for her to recognize just how deeply Farwell had embedded himself into her life. Meanwhile, Farwell had managed to construct a double life. Now married with children, he projected the image of a respectable police officer and devoted family man. Yet behind closed doors, he was a predator, exploiting Sandra's vulnerability while maintaining his facade of normalcy. His ability to sustain this duplicity for so long reflects a more significant issue within the Canton Police Department, a troubling culture of complicity and silence that enabled him to act with impunity. The Canton Police Department had previously encountered multiple scandals, with allegations of misconduct and abuse of power emerging regularly. These weren't isolated incidents. They illustrated a systemic problem where officers could misuse their authority without fear of repercussions. This pervasive culture of corruption created an environment that allowed someone like Farwell to thrive unchecked. Tragically, it was within this toxic atmosphere that Sandra found herself ensnared, ultimately leading to a devastating outcome that would not only alter her life, but also highlight the critical need for reform within the department. Sandra's apartment building. By late 2023, Sandra's life had reached a breaking point. Increasingly isolated from friends and family, she struggled financially and emotionally, feeling trapped in a relationship that had turned toxic. Yet amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope emerged when she discovered she was pregnant in early January 2024. Although her circumstances were far from ideal, she saw this as a potential fresh start, a chance for love, connection, and a new beginning. Sandra believed that having a child would draw her closer to Farwell, convincing herself that he would finally step up and embrace his responsibilities as a father. However, Farwell had other plans. When Sandra broke the news of her pregnancy, his reaction was anything but supportive. Instead of celebrating the life they had created, he responded with hostility, accusing her of lying and casting doubt on the child's paternity. This was not the loving response she had envisioned. Rather, it marked a new low in their already tumultuous relationship. Just days before her tragic death, Sandra, in a desperate attempt to connect with Farwell, showed him a sonogram, hoping it would soften his hardened heart. But instead of tenderness, she was met with violence. Farwell lashed out, pushing her to the ground and screaming that the child wasn't his. This violent outburst was the culmination of years of emotional manipulation, highlighting the depths of his control over her life. It was a stark reminder that the man she had once admired had morphed into a figure of fear and intimidation. Tragically, this moment was not just an isolated incident. It foreshadowed the devastating consequences of their relationship and the horrors that were yet to unfold. Last week of Sandra's life. In the days leading up to her death, Farwell's behavior became increasingly erratic and manipulative. He began communicating with Sandra more frequently, feigning concern about her pregnancy and even offering to put his name on the birth certificate. To Sandra, this sudden shift must have felt like a breakthrough, a sign that Farwell was finally stepping up and taking responsibility for their child. However, beneath this facade lay a sinister agenda. Farwell was meticulously crafting a plan to eliminate her as a perceived threat. Farwell's request took a more alarming turn when he asked Sandra for the access code to her apartment building. Months earlier, she had offered it to him, but he had declined at that time. Now he seemed eager to gain access, which must have reinforced her belief that he wanted to be part of her life and their child's life. In a moment of hope, Sandra likely viewed this as a positive development, a step toward building a future together. He even discussed getting a key to her apartment, further fueling her optimism about their relationship. However, what Sandra interpreted as intimacy was, in fact, a chilling maneuver. Farwell's intentions were far from noble. He was using her trust to gain control and establish an avenue for his ultimate plan. While Sandra saw a potential family on the horizon, Farwell was scheming to tighten his grip on her life, viewing her as a liability that needed to be neutralized. This tragic misalignment of their realities would lead to a devastating outcome, revealing the depths of betrayal that had been brewing in their toxic relationship. Sandra's last known movements, captured by surveillance cameras. February 1, 2024, dawned as a cold, quiet day in Canton, seemingly innocent in its stillness. Sandra Birchmore went about her routine as usual, accepting a DoorDash delivery at her apartment just after 4:00 p.m. Surveillance footage from her apartment complex shows her retrieving a snow brush later that afternoon, a simple act that would turn out to be one of the last glimpses of her life. At 5:33 p.m., she was captured on camera for the final time, walking back into her apartment, seemingly unaware of the darkness that awaited her. Hours later, Matthew Farwell arrived at the building, entering at 9:14 p.m. He was dressed in street clothes, his face partially obscured by a hoodie and mask, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor as a police officer. This unusual caution reflected a heightened awareness of the gravity of what he was about to do. Surveillance footage recorded him entering Sandra's apartment building, but no one witnessed the events that would unfold inside. By 9:43 p.m., just 29 minutes after his arrival, Farwell was seen leaving the building. He later claimed that this was the moment he ended their relationship, insisting that Sandra was alive when he walked out. However, phone data and health metrics from Sandra's iPhone told a different story. The last recorded movement from her phone came just minutes before Farwell departed, raising crucial questions about his account. Investigators discovered that the phone's data indicated a sudden halt in activity, suggesting a violent confrontation had taken place just before Farwell's exit. The timing of the last recorded movement and the nature of their relationship painted a troubling picture, one where manipulation and control culminated in a tragic end. As authorities pieced together the events of that fateful night, the chilling truth behind Sandra's disappearance began to emerge, unraveling a complex web of deception, betrayal, and ultimately, loss. Forensic reenactment of Sandra's apartment and the crime scene. When Sandra's body was discovered, the initial ruling was suicide. The scene appeared meticulously staged to suggest that she had taken her own life, a narrative that seemed plausible at first glance. However, for those who knew her, her friends, family, and anyone aware of the complexities of her relationship with Farwell, the details simply didn't align with her character. Sandra had expressed genuine excitement about her pregnancy, speaking openly about her hopes for the future. She had even discussed plans to raise the child on her own if necessary, demonstrating a resilience and determination that contradicted the notion of suicidal intent. As investigators delved deeper into the case, a troubling pattern of inconsistencies began to surface. The timing of Farwell's visit was particularly suspicious. His arrival late at night, just hours after Sandra had been seen alive, raised immediate red flags. Furthermore, his behavior in the days leading up to her death was erratic, oscillating between feigned concern and hostility. These mood swings only added to the growing list of reasons to doubt his account. Discrepancies in Farwell's narrative further fueled suspicions. He claimed that he ended their relationship just before leaving the apartment, yet the timeline of events did not support this assertion. Witnesses and digital evidence indicated that Sandra's last phone activity occurred moments before he left, suggesting that something far more sinister had transpired in the short time he was inside. With each new piece of evidence, investigators began to build a compelling case against Farwell. The seemingly straightforward story of suicide unraveled into a complex tale of manipulation, control, and betrayal. Friends and family, who had always believed in Sandra's strength and determination, rallied together, refusing to accept the conclusion that their loved one had taken her own life. They pressed for a thorough investigation, certain that the truth lay buried beneath layers of deception. Courtroom sketches of Farwell's trial. In the weeks following Sandra's tragic death, a massive investigation was launched into Matthew Farwell's actions, ultimately leading to his arrest and the unearthing of a much larger conspiracy within the Canton Police Department. As investigators dug deeper, it became increasingly apparent that Farwell had not acted alone in his abuse of Sandra. Other officers within the department were implicated in similar misconduct, painting a chilling portrait of systemic corruption that had festered for years, thriving in an environment where accountability was notably absent. The ensuing trial of Farwell, which commenced in early 2025, marked a watershed moment for the Canton community and beyond. For the first time, the public gained insight into the pervasive culture of abuse and cover-ups that had allowed officers like Farwell to operate with impunity. Testimonies revealed not only the details of Sandra's manipulation and the emotional abuse she endured, but also how other officers either turned a blind eye or actively participated in similar predatory behavior. The trial garnered significant media attention, mobilizing public outrage and calls for reform within law enforcement. When the verdict was finally announced, it was a moment of bittersweet justice. Farwell was found guilty of multiple charges, including involuntary manslaughter, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the community breathed a collective sigh of relief at the outcome, for Sandra's family, no sentence could ever bring her back or restore the future she had hoped for. The fallout from Sandra's case extended far beyond the courtroom. It ignited conversations about the need for systemic changes in police culture and the importance of protecting vulnerable individuals from those in positions of authority. Advocacy groups emerged, calling for transparency and accountability within law enforcement, ensuring that Sandra's legacy would live on as a catalyst for change. As the community mourned the loss of a bright life cut short, they vowed to honor Sandra's memory by fighting for justice and reform, determined to ensure that such tragedies would not be repeated. Sandra's family leaving the courthouse looking somber but relieved. For Sandra Birchmore, justice came too late. Her life was tragically cut short by a man who abused his power, coupled with a system that failed to protect her. What was meant to be a mentorship turned into a nightmare, illustrating the profound vulnerabilities that can arise when trust is misplaced. Sandra's story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked authority and the devastating consequences that ensue when those entrusted with our safety choose to manipulate and destroy rather than uplift and protect. The legacy of her life and death calls for urgent action and reform within law enforcement agencies. It emphasizes the need for vigilant oversight and accountability to ensure that individuals in positions of power are held responsible for their actions. The circumstances surrounding her tragic end highlight not only the personal loss, but also a broader societal issue, challenging us to confront the systemic failures that allowed her abuse to go unchallenged for so long. Sandra's story is one of caution, urging us to remain aware of the potential for abuse that exists within hierarchical structures. It invites us to advocate for those who are vulnerable, to listen to their voices, and to strive for a society where such tragic outcomes are no longer a possibility. Her memory inspires a commitment to creating a safer world for everyone, where trust is honored and authority is exercised with integrity and respect. Fades out. Sandra Birchmore's death may have brought attention to the rampant corruption in Canton, but how many other stories like hers remain untold? How many other vulnerable individuals are out there, suffering in silence because the very people they trust are the ones causing them harm? If Sandra's story teaches us anything, it's that we must never be afraid to speak out. We must demand accountability from those in positions of power and ensure that tragedies like this never happen again. Thank you for watching. Please share Sandra's story so that her memory lives on and that her tragic death may lead to meaningful change.